So so it's gonna be you, and then back to you for Eileen's, right? Yeah.
So it's on, so you can hold it.
Oh, she go back. Well, she's heard it. Heard yours. I thought you just asked her. Well, shoot. You should be here. Should we hear from you? Maybe. Okay. I've got. Okay. Sorry.
That's matches with mine. 2 minutes.
Okay. So you'll do the intro and then read yours. Then she's gonna read yours.
Then I
And
pass.
then back to you for Eileen's. Is that what you want to do?
I think it might be a good idea.
And then I'll read it.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll read mine to you at once, if you want to read them both at once. whatever you want to do.
Well, why don't we let her, because I'll be doing it. Welcome to Oasis. The memoir writing class is sharing some essays with you tonight. Jane Starner was the initial leader and champion for this small group of residents, ranging from about 4 to a dozen at various times. She suggested topics for our writings. We would read ours and discuss them each time we met. After her death, Eileen Flory accepted the reins and has continued the original plan. We meet twice a month on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. We take a vacation during the summer months, and you are welcome to join us anytime. I will begin the reading. I had my mouth open too. I am Grace Voorhees. Here, bossy, nice bossy, as a snap of the stanchion closing sounded in the air. Dad pulled a tiny 3-leg stool to place next to the warm ovine body. He sat down, his forehead touching the flank of the Jersey cow. First, you have to clean the udders carefully. Then you're ready to milk. A galvanized pail appeared under the full bloated udder. Take 2 teats in your hand and pull like this. Now you try it. He exchanged places with me, and I tried. Nothing. Keep trying. Squeeze 2 fingers as you gently pull down. Oh, I get it, and proceeded to milk the cow. Dad left me to continue as he went to first, the next one, 2, 3 cows milked before I had finished the first. This became our pattern that summer of 1942. I had just graduated from high school. My father was noticeably worried. The young men he usually hired for the summer were all out fighting the war. You know, the war to end all wars. I tried to help. I was willing, but a poor substitute. The next day, He taught me the ins and outs of handling the horses. He drove us out to the hayfield where he had cut the hay. He had waited while it dried and winnowed into rows, and then we were ready. Arriving in the field, he handed me the reins as he jumped off the wagon. He forked hay onto the wagon as I drove the horses in step with his progress. When a heap of sweet-smelling hay was about to fall off on the other side of the wagon, I halted. Dad jumped up on the bed and distributed the hay around so that we could go again and fill it as high as possible. We repeated these steps until the wagon was heaped as much as possible. And we ventured toward the barn, Dad driving. On arriving near the barn, close to the open haymow, Dad jumped off, leaving me again with the reins. He unhitched the horses free from the wagon, went into the haymow to loosen the huge forks, and pulling them onto the full heap, jumping down again onto the soft, dry grass, he filled the fork with a large bunch and told me to go. Giddy up, I called to the horses as they moved from the barn, causing the forked hay to rise as Dad guided it into the open mow. He next had to get into the mow to spread the dry hay around to allow room for the next load. Thus we continued until the wagon was empty. We were tired and hungry, but we needed to feed, water, and bed the horses, milk the cows before we could fill our bellies. This summer was the closest I had been with my father. He was a solemn, seemingly lonely man. Usually I saw him only at meals. After supper, he turned on the radio, listening to it until bedtime. We could listen to Amos and Andy, Fibber McGee and Molly, The Lone Ranger, or country music. Sometimes he crossed the road to visit with Ova, a handicapped man who owned and operated a small gas station across the road from us. There were 4 children in our family. When we reached our 12th birthday, Dad gave us a calf. I cared for mine, well, rather Dad did, and it grew to adulthood. She was bred and delivered a bull calf. We sold it, and later she had a heifer calf, which I raised to adulthood. Dad bought both of them when I left for college. They helped pay for my education. Dad was not a handsome fellow. He was short, rotund, with a round, ruddy face, a fringe of hair on top, a bulbous nose, and smiling eyes. Once a child approached him, looked him over carefully, and whispered, "Are you Santa Claus?" Saturday night, the family piled into the Model A car, and Dad drove us the 3 miles into Beaverton. As usual, with the inside lights brightly lit. I was embarrassed that my friends could see us arriving. One did not have to guess when Elmer Schock arrived. He was known for his slow 35-mile-an-hour pace. He was even given a ticket in Saginaw for speeding. He was driving 35 miles in a 25-mile speed zone. back to Beaverton. The kids were given a nickel to spend on ice cream or candy, and we walked the street with friends until it was dark enough for the band to perform on the bandstand just beyond the grocery store. Or we needed to get our own cornets and clarinets ready to join the band. After the performance, families wandered around an open area facing a whitewashed back of the store. Spreading out blankets or chairs, we awaited the next episode of the stunt pilot or the grizzled cowboy to follow their progress, their escapades. Dad and Mother had brought cream and eggs to be sold at the creamery. Then they bought the groceries and other necessities for the week. Sundays, too, were special. We had bathed on Saturday night, so we were ready, clean and ready, and to associate with others. Dad donned himself in his only suit, buttoned his shirt with no tie. He always sat in the second pew from the front in church. Sometimes Mother sat with him in her little white bonnet and plain dress. As she lost her hearing, she would sit in the front row. Then she stopped attending. She couldn't hear enough to feel a part of the congregation. But Dad was regular in his attendance. Congregants looked forward to seeing Elmer Schock in the same place Sunday after Sunday. After a sumptuous meal of perhaps chicken and dumplings or chicken and noodles, whatever, and more, we were expected to rest. Oh, I hated that. I wanted more activity. I usually had a book to read. After the evening meal of perhaps mush and milk, we played games. Dad's favorite was checkers, and he was hard to beat. Mother preferred dominoes, but we also played Turing, authors, Chinese checkers. We sometimes made ice cream in summer or popcorn in the winter to go with our family time. While my father was not famous or a leader, he was just my dad.
Oh, yes. I'm Carol Burgett, and the memoir I want to read today is kind of a bittersweet memory. I titled it A Christmas to Remember. In 1968, as the holiday season approached, our excitement grew by leaps and bounds. Paul and I and our three sons, ages 13, 10, and 6, were planning to go to Florida over Christmas vacation. But then on December 3rd, my father had a fatal heart attack. We canceled our plans because we didn't want to leave Mom alone at Christmas. She urged us to go ahead with our plans. We told her we would go on one condition, that she would go with us. It didn't take much to persuade her because she had always wanted to go to Florida. We traveled in our station wagon, pulling behind us our old Nimrod, a very basic camping trailer. On the trip down and back, Mom had to contend with 3 rambunctious boys and the dog, Cinder, who always seemed to end up sitting on her lap. We did the usual sightseeing, visiting St. Augustine, and went for a ride in a glass-bottomed boat. But the box singing tower with the beautiful gardens surrounding it impressed us the most. I believe Mom really appreciated going to Florida. The times she shed a few tears. And I think it helped her get through her first Christmas without Dad.
As you see, we have an empty chair for Eileen, our leader. She was under the weather, so I'm reading her essay on the Up Gold Hill for Huckleberries. Up the trail we climbed toward the top of Gold Hill in the Oregon Cascades. Two strong, wiry university academics and three kids. The fathers carried on their backs their sleeping bags, a tarp, food, a hatchet, and a cooking pot. My best friend Ellen, her sister Osa, and I carried our own sleeping bag, a towel, a ditty bag, and a change of underwear. Among us, we carried plenty of empty containers for our quarry, the Vaccinium ovotum, evergreen huckleberries. We were following in an ancient tradition of people seeking a berry so plentiful that serious pickers could preserve enough to provide a substantial part of their winter's food. Native American families still return each fall to huckleberry territories that their ancestors used. As our little flock neared the top, we kids raced ahead and spotted Gold Hill's flat campsite and its clear spring. We took off our shoes and dabbled our feet in the cool water, earning us a "Don't you kids realize?" scolding, since that spring was to be our source of water for cooking and drinking. But the silt settled, and soon we built a fire and had our meal, heated up from cans. That night we slept soundly under the stars. All the next day we stripped clusters of huckleberries, blue-black BBs, thick of bushes, sometimes taller than we were, into our tubs and pails, keeping an eye out for any bears that might be out for the same purpose. Then we packed everything up securely for the trek home. On the steep trail down, we slipped on chinquapin leaves and fell into chinquapin burrs and complained afterwards that muscles we never knew we had were sore. Ellen and Osa's mother made pies and jam right away. My family just put the tart berries with that musky flavor, unlike any other, over ice cream and froze a bunch for later. I have no recollection of where Gold Hill is, but ever since those trips, I have picked huckleberries wherever I have lived in the Northwest, in the Cascades, in the Coast Range, and best of all, within earshot of the ocean.
Another regular member of our group is Joanne Shaw. And Joanne is away, but she wanted to contribute, so I will read hers. It's titled, "The First Time I Attended Church Camp." Church camp was part of my life every summer from the upper elementary grades through the early years of high school. Part of the appeal was the camp location. The United Brethren held their camps at Lake Wawasee near Syracuse, Indiana. This large lake was beautiful and it had a great beach with shallow sandy soil going out a good distance to accommodate beginning swimmers. There was also a large wooden tabernacle for evening worship and classroom facilities for day classes. Each church rented a private cottage for its campers and brought its own cooks and chaperones. My moral education was mostly in the charge of my mother. She took her responsibilities seriously and had a good moral compass herself. She was the perfect person to shape a child into a conscientious, straight arrow adult. And if I, as that child, happened not to listen to her wise counsel, she was ready to tell me that Jesus saw everything I did. That pulled me up short. When my older brother began junior high school, my mother decided he should go to church camp. He wasn't particularly excited about the idea, so my mother decided to go to camp as well as a cook and chaperone. This solution presented another problem, however. What would she do with the two younger children? I don't remember how Mom disposed of my younger brother. Perhaps he just stayed at my grandparents' farm for the week. But Mom decided I would go to camp too. In her eyes, I was ready for the experience. I was excited about going to church camp my first time. It would be an adventure to be away from home, but Mom would still be near. It sounded like interesting things would happen all day long, and there would be swimming every day. As a bonus, some of my girlfriends were a year older than me, and they would be going to camp too. It wasn't until we were actually at camp and unpacking that my mother prepared me for registration as a camper. It seems that I was technically a year too young to attend the camp. Mom had no intention of having me around the cabin all day, so she pulled me aside for a quiet talk. When I registered, if I was asked my age, I was to respond that I was a year older than I really was. But I probably wouldn't be asked. I was stunned. I was being told to lie about my age by my mother. How could I do that with Jesus watching me? I lay awake all that night, partly from the excitement of being away from home and partly from worry about what would happen the next day. What if I were caught lying? What would they do to me and to Mom? Would we be sent home and told to never come back? The next morning, I took a deep, deep breath and went in to register for the classes I wanted to take. One of the women asked how old I was, and I added a year to my age, probably looking thoroughly guilty. But I was tall for my age and did well in school. No one challenged me. The lie worked. Camp was great. I learned some new Bible stories and did some interesting crafts. I still have a tile that I decorated with my name and some flowers to be used under hot dishes. Swimming was so much fun that I went to a couple of early bird swims as well as the afternoon ones. I grew closer to my slightly older friends, although one did wonder how I managed to be there. And Mom was able to make this youthful contribution to her church. The lie worked with good effect. Perhaps Jesus didn't watch me all of the time. So that was by Joanne Shaw. And my name's Wendy Metzger, and mine is entitled A Birthday to Remember. Because we were a family with 6 children and a home that wasn't exceedingly large, we alternated who could have friends home after school for a birthday party. My siblings remind me that there was one party with friends each year, so this meant about every 6 years it was your turn. But a birthday party was cause for excitement regardless of whose birthday was celebrated that year. The anticipation began well in advance of the actual day. Important decisions needed to be made by the celebrating child. Who was to be invited? what to choose for the birthday meal, what type of cake to request, what might we play in the time between getting off the bus and supper time. The child celebrating that year could always count on lots of unsolicited ideas from the other siblings. It was an event. The year my youngest sister, Kathy, celebrated her 6th birthday turned out to be more than an event. It became family lore. That year, I had seen an article in our Jack and Jill magazine about creating a special cake. The article showed a cake decorated like a carousel. I wanted to reproduce this for Kathy, and I guess she was agreeable. We colored a piece of paper in bright colors, cut it into a circle, and pleated it to create a wide cone or tent for the top portion of the carousel. Mom purchased animal crackers that we arranged upright around the top edge of the cake. And of course, we added candles because every birthday cake needs candles. It was quite clever and attractive, and I was exceedingly proud of the finished cake. And I'm certain her friends were impressed. After the playtime and eating the meal, it was time to light the candles and sing happy birthday. My memory is that I lit the candles. I'm not certain I had all 6 of them lit before the paper carousel top went up in flames. Of course, we'd not prepared for this, so we didn't know how to put out the flames. But the paper quickly burned itself to ashes, which landed across the top of the icing. I'm sure there were screams of fear and tears of dismay. My memory ends there, but certainly Mom figured a way to salvage most of the cake. I'll hold it. Oh, I'll hold it. You need to tell me.
Okay, my name's Peggy Gilbert. And shortly after I got to Timbercrest, my neighbor, Charles Klingler, brought me a poem that he had written. And I was so impressed. So I decided I would try to write to him. And all these months later, I'm proud to be able to read a memoir and honored to this wonderful man, Charles Klingler. Ready? I know a dear family named Klingler. I've been blessed with good fortune and luck. The origin for this remarkable clan began with a couple playfully named Susie and Chuck. They combined their great genes to build a family so fine of 5 boys and 2 girls. What a courageous adventure for a total of 9. I'm not sure that adds up quite right. It's hard to keep track of the children they raised. A lawyer, a teacher, an actress, a prof, a brilliant truck driver, all drank from the same trough. I finally met Charles when pursuing my English degree. And that's when I met Whitman and Twain and Dickinson too. Now, all those years later, I can put into practice poetry is what Whitman meant when he said, I find letters from God dropped in the street. And finally, Emily Dickinson's definition of hope was so sweet. When I finally taught English, I struggled to find students who wanted to learn. That is till I was amazed and surprised. Charles Klingler's grandchildren, Maya and Nick, actually wanted to learn. They made my heart tick. I want to add, Nick would sit out in the hall reading A Tale of Two Cities. Before my class started, he'd read the assignment hurriedly in the hall. And now I'm amazed by this feasibility. The Klinglers were now my neighbors in this healthcare facility. I think every day of their amazing daughter, Susan. We became such wonderful friends. We'd be laughing right now about the weird twists of fate. I'm glad I thought of 2 or 3 lines before it wasn't too late. It's been lots of fun to think all these thoughts, but I cringe at the odd rhythm and corny use of rhyme. But it's because of the Klinglers I've taken the time. And so I conclude with a line from E. E. Cummings. I thank you, God, for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I thank you for the Klinglers.
We thought that would be a nice way to end today's, and we want to reiterate what Grace said earlier. Anybody's welcome to join us. Thank you.